In this video, I'm going to tell you two gruesome stories where two children were locked in a cage. Keep listening. Now, the case of Allison, this took place in Gloucester in Southern Virginia. Her crib was covered by a wooden cover which had boxes stacked on top of it, preventing Allison from getting out. The legs of the crib had been removed and there was no mattress inside. Allison herself was unable to extend her legs and sat in a contracted position with her knees against her chest. She had red spots on her bottom caused by her heels being forced under her body. The crib contained feces 1 to 2 inches deep in places. There was also sippy cups with the remains of soured milk, several empty black food trays from prepared frozen dinners, and a few toys which were filthy. And I know what you're thinking, ew, who does this to a child? The girl was extremely thin, her skeletal bones were prominently visible, and her hair was matted, brittle, and falling out in clumps. Her body was covered in feces. Her skin appeared to be peeling. She had an excessive amount of earwax outside her ears, and her fingernails and toenails were extremely long and contained feces. Police then arrested Shannon and Brian Gore. They were Allison's parents, and then the child services immediately removed the children. Now, Allison herself, well, she was born at home and she did not have a birth certificate. She had no medical records reflecting that she had ever been seen or treated by a doctor. Shannon told the caseworker, Casey, that Allison was good until she was 1 year old, and then she changed. Shannon said she kept Allison in a cage because of her developmental issues. However, no medical records supports this claim. 1 year old, she's been in a cage, huh? And now she's 6, or at that time she was 6 when they found her. 5 years in a cage, 5. Now, according to the father, the parents had been leaving Allison alone in the house since she was born, and they regularly left her in the crib while they went to work. The father could not recall the last time she was bathed. When the last time you bathed, you dirty bastard? Oh, Brian, not you. Although it is unclear from the parents' history how often she was fed. They told the investigators that towards the end, she was really fed. But this story gets worse. Listen to this. The authorities learned from Brian that they also had a male son. His name was Connor Gore. He was born on the 23rd of August 2007. As with Allison, their parents did not tell anyone about his birth, and unfortunately, Connor died in the home while he was very young. The father recalled how Connor had trouble breathing, but he was uncomfortable giving him CPR, and he did not want to call 911 because he was afraid paramedics would find Allison. It was also revealed he sexually abused Shannon, the mother, hence the birth of Connor. This was another reason he didn't want to tell the world about him. On the day of Connor's death, Brian went to work, and when he returned that evening, Connor was in his mother's arms. He was dead, and then the parents buried him in their backyard. Daughter in a cage, son in the backyard. Who the hell were these people? Now, Shannon herself worked as a restaurant manager, and Brian worked with air conditioners. Other than the room where Allison was caged, their parents' home was very clean. In fact, they ended up having another son. He was born in a hospital, thankfully, on March the 23rd, 2011. He was 1 month old when the police entered the house and found Allison, and then subsequently Connor. Other than being slightly dehydrated, this 1 month infant appeared healthy and had his own fully decorated clean room in the home. Now, during an inspection of the home, investigators reported that the family had a well cared for dog as well as fresh cut flowers in a vase. Dr. Verena Wyville, a child abuse pediatric specialist at the Children's Hospital of the King's Daughters, she examined Allison and reported that Allison, again who was 6 years old, weighed just under 16 pounds. Her height was just over 36 inches. Do you know what this means? This means it placed her in the 50th percentile for a 3-month girl, and her head circumference of just over 19 inches was 50th percentile for a 36-month-old girl. This meant Allison was more than 23 pounds underweight, and this is something I've never heard before. She was almost 5 inches shorter than she should have been for her age. Because her head circumference, which is related to brain growth, it was that of a 3-year-old, and Dr. Wyville estimated that her nutritional neglect started most likely before she was 3 years old. The same doctor said that when a child is malnourished such that the brain is not growing, severe developmental deficits take place that will never be overcome. And regarding Allison, whose head growth stalled at the age of 3, the doctor said that her nutritional neglect is long-standing and severe. According to the doctor, she exhibited symptoms of cachexia, which is physical wasting with the loss of weight and muscle mass, and she had no apparent speech, and her ribs, shoulder blades, spine, pelvic bones, and sacrum protruded prominently. I never thought about that. If she was in a cage the whole time, she never spoke. Does she even know how to talk? Does she know language? Wow. Allison also exhibited contractures, which are abnormal shortening of muscle tissue of her legs, which she could not extend. Her skin was dry and flaking, as was her scalp, and despite her physical condition, Allison appeared alert and interactive. There were no medical records showing that Allison ever received immunizations or regular well-child checkups. Dr. Wyville also noticed that Allison was never enrolled in school, reflecting medical and educational neglect. The doctor further said that the condition in which she was found was deplorable and incompatible with any form of normal parenting. In addition, leaving her alone subjected her to a risk of death from natural disasters such as a house fire, and imprisoning her in this crib constituted physical abuse, as does intentional starvation. Moreover, the extreme isolation in which Allison was kept constituted emotional abuse. Medical staff at the child services indicated that it was likely that Allison would not have survived more than a week longer in the condition she was found. Medical personnel worked to have her walking before her discharge from the hospital. While there, Allison was able to move herself 2 to 3 feet distances in a duck-like manner, with her legs still constricted against her chest. Moreover, since her removal, Allison did eventually begin to speak, but her knowledge base is equivalent to an 18 to 24-month-old child. That's so sad. And to reiterate, the infant child found in the house was 35 days old at the time of removal and was slightly dehydrated. Although he had received routine medical care, the mother received no prenatal care during her pregnancy. So to conclude on this insane case, I know what you're thinking, what the fuck, right? But to conclude, Brian and Shannon were found guilty in May 2015. Murder charges against the Gores were dropped after a judge ruled that there wasn't enough evidence to prove that their neglect of Connor caused his death. Shannon herself received 30 years for Allison and 10 years for Connor. Brian was given the same sentence. During the trial, Shannon asked for mercy and expressed remorse for what happened to her son. "You liar, you're not remorseful, you're just mad you got caught." She stated that things would have been different if she had been there that day. She said, "I was young and naive, stupid more like." She also said she was doing the best she could and never let her son cry. Brian himself told the judge, "I truly wished I would have thought and acted differently with my son." No, you dumbass. You don't need some kind of parenting class, right? Or some kind of advice to tell you, oh, what you're doing is wrong. There was no reason given on why they treated her this way. I can only imagine that they were lazy as fuck. 30 years? No. Should have been life. And before I move on to the next story, have you ever heard a story like that before? Wow. Now we move on to the case of Christian Choate. He was born in Indiana in 1995. His biological mother was Amy Estrada and his father was Riley Choate. Now, since his mother was charged with molesting him, she lost his and his sister's custody in 2004. Christian said to the authorities that his mother had inappropriately touched him. So Christian and his sister moved in with his father and his wife along with their children. And within a few days after moving in, he was found to have physically abused his niece while living with them. He was cited by the child services for inappropriate discipline. I wonder where he learned that from. In fact, Christian himself at the time was being treated for depression, anxiety, and ADD before and at the time of his death. Now we go to 2007. Kimberly Cubina lived with her husband Riley Choate. In the house were their stepchildren. So you had 13-year-old Christian, you had his sister Christina, and several of their nieces and nephews. And in March 2007, Kimberly and Riley notified Christian's school that he would be homeschooled from that date forward. But Kimberly and Riley took this action because Riley had begun to abuse Christian regularly. Kimberly herself was afraid that the school would notice bruises on Christian, that this would lead to inquiries from the child services, and that the children would be removed from the residence. So over time, Riley's abuse of Christian became increasingly violent. Therefore, Kimberly would step in to stop the sessions, but she never notified law enforcement or sought any medical treatment for Christian. Also, beginning in 2007, Christian was confined to a basement room. While initially allowed to leave the room sometimes, eventually Christian was permitted to leave the room to only eat and use the bathroom. Christian's confinement continued even after Kimberly and Riley learned that Christian had begun to relieve himself in this basement room. So in April 2008, the family moved. But when they moved, Christian continued to be confined to one room in the house. First, he was locked into a bathroom, then to a bedroom that he shared with Riley. In late 2008, Christian escaped the home until Kimberly and one of her nieces discovered Christian at a nearby Walgreens store. After this, Riley again abused Christian, and with Kimberly's help, confined Christian to a dog cage for the next 8 months. I'm not gonna lie, I'm telling you this story, I'm so angry. I am so angry. They locked him up and then he ran away. This poor child. Where were we to help him? Christian was permitted to leave the cage only to eat, to use the bathroom, and perform exercises at Riley's instruction. Christian was only permitted to do exercises because Kimberly observed that Christian's feet were turning purple, which indicated some kind of circulatory problems. Eventually, Christian began to soil himself while in the cage. Kimberly forced him to wear diapers. Also, during this period, Kimberly directed her stepdaughter to feed Christian one packet of ramen noodles for breakfast and another packet for lunch, as well as a serving of the family's dinner. Kimberly eventually observed that though Christian was 13 years old, he wore clothing at a size appropriate for a significantly younger child. Well, of course, you're starving this kid, you're torturing this kid, he's not gonna grow appropriately, is he, you stupid bitch? Kimberly then told her daughter to prepare 2 packets of ramen noodles for each meal and began to prepare protein shakes for Christian. However, Kimberly ceased to oversee Christian's feeding after she taught her daughter Christina to prepare Christian's food. And throughout this period, Kimberly continued to observe Riley's abuse of Christian, but did not inform the police or get him any medical attention. In fact, Kimberly also ordered her daughter to give Christian weekly cold baths to reduce swelling and bruising on his body. So, on April the 1st, 2009, Kimberly was out doing errands. She comes home to find everyone in the home walking on eggshells because Riley and Christian had gotten into trouble. They had an argument. Kimberly let Christian out of his cage to lay on a baby mattress and noticed that he was pale, lethargic, and glassy-eyed. On April the 2nd, Kimberly left the home again to attend a conference at school, and during the conference, Kimberly received a phone call, and that phone call was, "Something is wrong with Grandma." Grandma was a code name they used for Christian. She then went home and she found Christian had died. She then called Riley, and Riley said to her, "Oh, shut up. Why don't you take care of it until I get home?" Wow, this wanker. So now, when he was found dead in the cage, Kimberly consequently ordered Christina to wrap Christian's body in a blanket, place the body in 2 garbage bags, and put the entire bundle into a plastic tote. Kimberly then ordered Christina to help her carry Christian's body across the street to a trailer belonging to someone called Grandma. After this, Kimberly enlisted her sister's help in driving to a hardware store to purchase 2 bags of concrete and 2 bags of lime. Upon Riley's return from home that evening, and at his insistence, Kimberly assisted Riley in burying Christian's body underneath a shed on this grandma's property. Riley tore up the floor of the shed and dug a 2 or 3 foot deep hole. Christian's body was placed in the hole. Kimberly gave Riley lime and concrete to cover Christian's body, placed a cross and a Bible on the body, and watched as Riley covered Christian's body with dirt. Now, what's interesting is that Christina was threatened by Riley, so she remained silent. But 2 years later, when Riley moved away and Christina stayed in Indiana, she reached out to her stepsister and disclosed the horrifying truth about Christian. Informed about the situation, Christian's biological mother called 911, revealing the location of her son's body, which had been hidden for 2 years. Now, what will make you even more angry is that Christian wrote letters before he died. You know what he said in these letters? He said, "I just want to be loved. I just want to go outside and play with children." He claimed that when he was hungry, he had to steal food because his family allegedly refused to feed him. He stated in these letters that the only time he was allowed out of the cage was to clean the house, but that he was never allowed outside. He waited for someone, anyone, to come bring him food or something to drink. While some of his writings were random, others were assignments from his stepmother Kimberly. His mother wrote, "Why do you want to play with your Peter? Why do you still want to see your mum? Why can't you let the past go? What does it mean to be part of a family?" I don't know what these are, but what the hell is wrong with you, Kimberly? Christian stated that he wanted to be liked by his family and that he wanted to die because no one liked the way he behaved in these writings. And it was confirmed that when they looked at Christian's body, he had died from blunt force injuries and a fractured skull. When he was abused, Kimberly's sister lived next door. She initially denied seeing Christian being abused. She never questioned anything because she thought Christian had run away or disappeared. However, she later admitted to investigators that she heard Riley abusing Christian. She also claimed that when she saw Riley striking Christian in the arm, she told her sister, "I'm leaving. This is ridiculous. You need to do something about this." And according to the child records and witnesses in the case, Kimberly's sister witnessed the violence against Christian but did not report it. She did not know if Christian was abused on a regular basis. Other children who lived in the house witnessed the violence against Christian but did not report it. In fact, one of her sister's children thought about telling someone about the situation and written it in their diary. But Kimberly threatened this child and told her that if she revealed the situation to someone, she would do to her what she had done to Christian. In Christian's life, he had a pediatrician. Her name was Dr. Letitia Chai Koa, who treated him for depression and anxiety. She was one person who was aware of everything and whose silence was not motivated by fear. Christian told her he was locked up in his house at night a year before his death, but she never told anyone about what he told her. In fact, one of the neighbors, Lori Wingard, was aware of the problem and told the child services twice. This neighbor said that Kimberly came out of the house and stood there on the sidewalk and talked to the lady, the child services lady, and I remember thinking, go inside. The caseworker did come to the house but didn't go inside. Lori disputed the record that any caseworker went inside the house, claiming she watched the woman interact with Kimberly. Now, in the trial, Riley himself pled guilty and he admitted to the charge of neglect of a dependent and depriving his daughter of an education, and removal of a body from a death scene or altering a death scene after burying Christian after his death. He received a plea deal that netted him 40 years in prison. In fact, he told the judge, "I realize how wrong I was. I take full responsibility. I'm very ashamed and remorseful. I loved my son." No, you fucking didn't. And following the incident and the arrest, Riley and Kimberly divorced. On May the 10th, 2011, Kimberly was charged with murder, battery, 2 counts of neglect of a dependent, and criminal confinement. Kimberly and the state entered into a plea agreement, whereby Kimberly agreed to plead guilty to a single count of neglect of a dependent, with all the other charges dismissed. In exchange, Kimberly was obliged to provide testimony against Riley. She was sentenced to 25 to 35 years in prison. Now, do you know how fucking angry this made me? Forgive me for my French, but it made me so angry. I have contacted the Indiana Prison Service. I want to interview both of them because I want to ask them directly, what the hell were you thinking? They probably won't let me because a lot of these, it's either telephone or on the rare occasion, it may be a video, but I'm going to try and get it done. People like this, no, they should not be allowed to just go away in jail and that's it. I mean, as taxpayers here in America, who do you think provides their meals? Who do you think provides their shelter? So no, they need to be held accountable to us. So watch this space. Anyway, comment, tell me what you think.